Hi, I'm Vince. Welcome to my Vince Unlimited channel and to the true story of my frightening, life-threatening apprenticeship initiation. You're going to want to hear about this one, so settle in and be grateful you're sat comfortably in a chair, standing on a secure floor. Tell most people you served an apprenticeship, they will assume you wore overalls and did manual labour, because many apprentices did, and still do so today. However, there's another form of apprenticeship, more akin to what's perceived as work experience today, which is an office-based apprenticeship, where you learn to avoid the need to actually work in overalls. It was this sort of apprenticeship that I signed up for. I'd left school at 16 and needed a job which actually paid me some money because basically I didn't have any. I was never given any pocket money and was prevented from earning any as a child because I might have bought a bike with it. Furthermore, the only job I knew at the time involved two things I was incapable of providing: delivering newspapers, which required the deliverer to actually already have a bicycle, plus the ability to get up early in the morning, which I couldn't. The net result of all this meant that at the time I set off to walk to my first job, I earned less than £5. Savings I had accumulated over about 4 years of having to get off the bus to school several stops early, thus saving about 2p a time, garnering a few modest birthday gifts, then not spaffing it all around on frivolities like sweets, toys and vital socialising. My school's employment department had been particularly dire because it was not often used. The grammar school system was designed to line kids up to enter the sixth form at 18, take a few A-levels and secure the finest university entrances. It appeared I wasn't bound headlong to the major universities, or even the minor ones, nor even any of the many polytechnics yet to be rounded up into university status. My alternative was to find actual paid work. As far as I recall, there are only about a dozen laminated job ideas in the designated section at school, none of which inspired any form of creativity, and most of which were just banking. But I needed a job. Starting out so early may cause you to think career rather than job, but a managed working life stretching far into your future when you're 16 is as likely to be considered as the first option to paying a pension that will probably never come. Spoiler, it does. I considered what I actually enjoyed at school, understood because I was incorrectly told that biology was no basis for a career, and had to look at my next most interesting option. Art was a lowly second choice, but the only thing I could think of, so set about finding a job based on drawing. But it seemed with my particular skills, the options were better for technical drawing rather than creative art. There were many apprenticeships out there at the time, and with my grammar school education, I had a far better chance than average to get a place. The first attempt was with Condor Engineering. They were making their name in designing and constructing steel frames for buildings, and were based in a light modern office in Winchester, and felt special. This is about as far as I'd ever travelled, save for holidays, so it seemed exotic. The beautifully printed glossy brochure suggested a young dynamic team using on-site facilities such as sports events and a canteen, alongside lots of pictures of boring straight line bright yellow steel frames. The only thing they didn't offer was an interview, so I took the next option. Pirelli Cables were in Southampton Docks and they offered an interview. I was 16 years old and lacked every form of social confidence. I recall sat in the dreary waiting room with its high ceilings, dull paintwork, heavily leaded grimy windows and peculiarly high-set grubby floor. In hindsight, the floor was almost certainly at actual floor level, but the chair was sagging, its legs cut too short. I recall virtually nothing else, not even what the job was, except the stale, dank smell and no promise of sports events or canteens. My second interview was with a much more local company. Situated barely a mile or two from where I lived was Johnson & Baxter Southampton Limited. This small to medium-sized company of about 20 or so people was much less intimidating, situated in a converted old property with adjacent large shed and domestic property and about half an acre of hard standing land halfway up a hill on a busy road in Shirley. I cannot recall how I knew about the job, but found myself in front of the managing director, who saw something in me and offered a 5-year apprenticeship there and then. I would leave school and go straight to work. Year out to travel, to discover myself? No chance, not even a day off. A Friday school finish with a start at work on Monday. Not recommended. I had wanted a few extra days, or preferably weeks off between finishing school and starting work, but the dual needs of industry and starting my formal apprenticeship had to prevail. Unbeknownst to me, I was booked to start at Southampton Technical College, and it was considered essential that I familiarise myself with what the company did before I set off into a technical environment. Consider this. I knew nothing about the industry I had entered. I went to the interview because they said I could sit and draw technical things on a drawing board. I understood that it was a heating company, but didn't know what this really was and didn't think to associate it with the filthy and brutalist construction industry. However, the MD was thrilled. He needed a new young trainee engineer, never expected to secure a top grammar school graduate with prospects of more than double the formal qualifications of typical applicants. My father and the boss duly signed my apprenticeship papers, and I was indentured in to be the boy for the next 5 years of my life. I duly arrived at my new office at 9 AM as requested. The place was alight with people coming and going as I waited in reception, being ignored. It was already clear that the starting time was much earlier, and I was going to have to learn to get my butt out of bed early. I started to think of all my school friends having a lie-in and looking forward to a long, lazy summer of doing precisely what they wanted. J&B was a medium-sized heating and ventilation company. Medium-sized means more than one man in a band, but smaller than the regional or national contractors. It was a specialist industry where engineers and their managers worked alongside office-based administration staff and visited construction sites to supervise the design, construction and commissioning of mechanical services for general construction companies who were building or renovating industrial or commercial properties. I was to work in a cramped office with 2 qualified engineers, a senior engineer and the estimator. In his separate office was the boss. Also in my office was a young guy called Michael, who had just completed his office apprenticeship there and was imminently moving on. He explained that unless you do this, you're forever seen in the company as the apprentice, never offered a proper qualified engineer's wage. The administration team were in another office and comprised the women, because it was the late 70s. Typing out the letters and invoices the engineering team and boss had given them, plus filling out their company accounting books, sorting the payroll, and making the tea for everyone both mid-morning and mid-afternoon. The only other 2 guys generally around were the site's labour supervisor and the van driver, whose role was to take in deliveries and gather the products from the stores to distribute to the work sites. This was to be the place that I had signed up to be at for the next 5 years. I was 16, back to education 1 day a week with the next youngest person to me aged about 30. I wasn't enamoured. I was even less enamoured when I was told that I was effectively next to useless, having known nothing of the industry and that everyone was far too busy to take me under their wing and tell me something. So after 2 days I was to be shipped off to one of the work sites for a fortnight to learn what the company actually did. It was a mostly miserable 2.5 weeks of feeling out of place, being constantly grimy and picked on at every occasion. The guys on site appeared gruff, uncultured, dined like animals and observed ridiculously strict traditions of power. I was smaller, weaker and vulnerable, but it seemed in some places these adults still acted like the childhood bullies they obviously once were. One tradition was to belittle, demean and scare those first entering their profession, with the ultimate test being the Apprenticeship Initiation. This was a severe ganging up by all the others to frighten and humiliate any newcomer, and as I was from the office, it was seen as their best chance to do me over, due to my position. After all, I represented the them in their us and them mindset. Therefore, in accordance with the strict bully code, they informed me of this early on to create the fullest effect. The initiation itself was hardly a plan of thought or complexity. It involved a group of them grabbing me when least unexpected, which was difficult as I'd been told to expect my trial at any time. Then, like a group of baying hyenas, they stripped me of my lower clothing and slapped my privates with handfuls of Boss White pipe setting compound, usually used in the industry to secure jointed steel pipe threads to fittings alongside strands of hemp. After the humiliating task was completed, I had to take quick action. I needed to get this fast setting compound off because I'd already learned that it set like concrete. I recall the sickening feeling of ever hardening cement in my trousers as I rushed home on the first available bus. Then, when at home, had to judiciously scissor chop it all off as it was fast creating an unbreakable cast of my pubic area. It was surprising I went back the next day, but I knew the incident would help me bond with my new buddies. To a certain extent it worked. I think they were impressed that I endured the tradition with good grace, and I learned the stories of their own initiations. I still had to make their tea though. In the 2 weeks at Portswood bus station, I learned about the pipes and variously named fittings that made up the stock materials used, the subtle size differences between copper and steel pipework systems, the sheer size and weight of some of the equipment, how they interacted with the other site trades such as the electricians, and how to cut a thread on a big steel pipe using a noisy electromechanical machine with jaws that looked like they could take an arm off. I even learned not to inwardly snigger at the words and phrases used in the industry, like male and female couplings, flanges, ball valves, nipples and cocks. I did hate every moment of it. I went home daily covered in oil and smelling of pipe fitting cement, my hands covered in painful little metal shards and splinters, my jeans ruined, my life choices questioned. But I only had to do this until the final Friday on the second week, and I'd never have to pretend to be a pipe fitter again. However, things took a sinister turn. Although I'd been initiated, word started going around in the final week that because I was from the office and therefore soon to be lording it over all of them with my white shirt, tie and company car, they'd have to do another initiation. I tried to argue that would demean the point of their traditional values of a once-only initiation, and even tried to surely a second initiation is a misnomer, as initiating can only be achieved once. That sort of reasoning. I think it may have been this cockiness that swung them definitively towards doing me again. My mindset inwardly prepared me for another embarrassing balls set. However, this time things were taken to 11. First I was grabbed by the mob and tied with my hands behind my back to an aging plastic chair using just duct tape. Then, to add colour and decoration, various shreds of hemp were stuffed everywhere into my clothing. I looked like a finalist in a Wurzel Gummidge competition. More tape was then liberally wound around my face so I could barely breathe and definitely not make further complaints. And as a pièce de résistance, a foot-long rubber flexible hose connection was jammed between my tightly secured legs just to make the whole spectacle look a little bit rude. Clearly this humiliation wasn't enough, so they lifted me onto a trolley and wheeled me out into the busy Portswood High Street, where I was left. In the hour that I was there, not one single passing pedestrian intervened to release me, ask if I was all right, or even drop off a couple of pence in a collecting tin. I presume that this kind of thing must happen a lot in Portswood. Eventually the guys returned to wheel me back into sight. Still wrapped up, I heard them discussing what else they could do. Eventually the cruelty committee decided that it was best that I was strung up. They tied some weak-looking electrical copper cable to the chair back and hoisted me upwards. I thought the shredding cord would snap at any moment. Higher and higher I went, dangerously dangling face forward. My body secured to the chair alone by tape you could rip apart in your hands. And when I said high, I mean it. This was a bus maintenance depot, tall enough to accommodate double-decker buses, with deep pits set into the floor to enable the mechanics to work comfortably below the chassis. And I was swinging precariously around, facing down towards one of the pits. I was in genuine fear for my life. Mind you, the hyenas were finished. Quite literally, it was 5 o'clock. They packed their bags and left. Even switched off the lights with a cheery comment that they would see me on Monday. I was left in the dark, expecting to have to wait until the weekend to be rescued. My only hope was that my family might just notice I wasn't there that evening, and that I didn't need to pee for 60 odd hours. As it happens, a couple of guys eventually returned. They had finished their Friday pints and thought they would check back on me to see if I'd escaped. I didn't even try. If I'd even wiggled, the wrong bit of tape may have unravelled or wire unwound. I'd have face dropped 30 feet onto the oily concrete. It was not the oil that was worrying me this time. They laughed and they joked, but some compassion finally won and they lowered me back to terra firma, undid the trusses and finally let me go home. And if you're still sceptical about the very real precariousness of my position, a few weeks later on the same site, One of the pipe fitters was drilling through a high beam whilst on a tall scaffolding, which fell over, sending him crashing into one of the pits. The fall killed him. Thanks for listening through to the end. You can tell that this is the only luck that has allowed me to share this story, so show your appreciation by adding a like and subscription to my channel for more compelling stories. And why not pop a comment below to tell your own experiences of apprenticeship initiation. Hang on in there if you can, and bye for now.